many knew it was Earth Day, the 22nd? Good. I'm glad to know that you were conscious of this day that was presented to us by Senator Gaylord Nelson in 1970. And at that time, the first Earth Day in 1970, 20 million people showed up to demonstrate throughout all the cities in the United States to return to a consciousness that connects us to nature and to Earth. The theme this year is Restore Our Earth, is the theme for 21-21. I feel blessed. I feel very blessed that being raised in Oklahoma, which was the end of the Trail of Tears, as they moved from Georgia all the way across and ended up in Oklahoma, around Tulsa, where I was raised, Bartlesville. And the culture was very much alive growing up. There was what we call buffalo, they call it bison now, but it was buffalo, it was just roaming around on different kind of ranches, and it was just nothing to see that. It was nothing to go to a powwow and be a part of the great celebration of the dance of the Native Americans. One of my best friends in school, I'll never forget her name, was Tilly Newman. That was her name that was given to her. I'm sure it was not her Native American name, but I would go to her house and she would teach me how to take what we called hominy or corn and dye it into beautiful colors and make necklaces and bracelets. And it was just a wonderful thing as you're growing up to touch into a different culture than the culture in which you're being raised in. And as you all know, I was very blessed to also early be connected to the African American community where I lived. So I think I'm a better person today because of it. I think I'm a more open person. I think I'm a person with less strong boundaries, but I've been able to kind of flow into those things that are not in my first chakra, which would be my tribal, national upbringing. And I think we're all the better for it if we really learn more about the story of the citizens of the planet than just the citizens of wherever we've been raised. Whatever religion we've been raised in, whatever even political background we've been raised in, it's so wonderful to open your heart and to hear others and let people tell you their story. So today my attention does go toward the Native Americans. For the European Americans living in North America, there's been a very specific example of our journey as we moved from human adolescence and are attempting to move into a spiritual adult maturation. We have to look at the way in which evolution and creation has unfolded itself. And as you know, I use these two terms interchangeably. I'm not one or either. I am not just an evolutionist and I'm not just a creationist. But I see that they both work beautifully together. I mean, if you just stop on a common sense level that when somebody has an idea, the idea of the car, when Henry Ford had the idea of the car, or somebody had the idea of anything that you have used today or this week, that idea was not at the level in which you used it today. It was very primitive, right? I mean, some of us here, I hate to say this, but I can actually remember the old washboard. Washers and the old washers on the back porch and all that kind of thing. And it's certainly different than what I used to wash my clothes in today, or a dishwasher or anything else, because it evolved. Ideas have to evolve. So there's a place for creation and for creation to evolve itself in the outer world, the mundane world that we all live in today. So when we came to this land, we, the Europeans, did not consider the people that was here 20 million years before our arrival. To the early Europeans, they were seen as savages, which gave the Europeans the rationale to treat them as they would finally treat nature, as though it was spiritless. And there's a lot of people today that do not believe that there's anything in nature that is spirit, that is life. It's an inanimate object, no feelings. And that has been so proved wrong, even in science. We know, for instance, that plants themselves respond to certain kinds of music. I've seen this research in playing some kind of loud music, rock stuff, I don't know what you call it anymore, but it grew away from it. But when you played the classicals and you played the music of the soul and of the spirit, they go toward it and wrap themselves around it. So we know, most of us in this room, I'm preaching to the choir in the fact that we know about trees and we know more about nature than maybe some of our own family and friends would know about, that the Spirit dwells in all things. The Native Americans were not savages in their own right. They were earth-centered. And they had an earth-centered spirituality. Because of the thinking of most Europeans who came to America, this country was colonized, but not discovered. We colonized it without discovering it. The European colonizers, by and large, did not discover the riches at all. Instead, they saw a land free for the taking. If you look on a map of the United States of America, you will see a lot of land that has never been used, that was taken from the Native American people. It's just sitting there. And this all comes from, I think, an ancient belief in lack, that if we don't take it, somebody else will. I think America today would be much different if we would embrace the great wisdom of the ages of the Native American people. Now, in the last few decades, the last 30 years or so, there has been a reawakening to many people of many cultures toward Native American ceremony and spirituality. In my last few decades of traveling and speaking across the country, it's not rare to end up in a group that was having a sweat lodge or was having Native American drummings or Native American powwows or jewelry making or something that was Native American. And it wasn't just Native American people, it was people from all walks of life. And there's a reason for that I think is important. And this comes from Beverly Whitehead, who pointed out that many of us are the ones that fulfill the prophecy of the Hopi. And what their prophecy was, that in the very last of the age, as we are moving away from the old age and finding ourselves into the new age, that the earth would call back some of her old caretakers. And I stress to you that directions that you are drawn toward that are not specifically in your present time teaching. It's not traditional to the tribe. It's not traditional to the religion in which you were born in. But it's an attraction, something that's outside of the boundaries of how you have been programmed to be the human being that you were programmed to be. And you get out of that program and you find yourself being attracted toward, say, Native American and other indigenous ceremonies and people. I would say that because that maybe somewhere in your Akashic records of past lives, you have been those things. That's why you're attracted to them. They're not new to you. You're remembering something that you have forgotten in your past life somewhere. So I don't think it's just a thing of people, one chooses this and one doesn't choose that and whatever. I think something is awakened as we progress on our spiritual path, that is awakened, and we have more access to the selves that we were, that we still are. Nothing is forgotten in your life story. It's all there. Whether you remember it or not, people are always fascinated and say to me, how can you believe in reincarnation? If you don't, do you remember who you were last time? I say, absolutely not, I don't. And I'll say to them, do you remember what you had for lunch Thursday? They go, no, I don't. And you expect me to remember my past lives, and you can't remember a few days ago what you had for lunch. Of course, each time we come back into this density, we forget, but it does not forget us. It remains written in what we call the soul. The soul carries this story. And as I said individually, I feel richer because of my experience, and I feel America would be in much better shape if it would have also expanded itself to realize this. Sometimes I talk about my own people like I'm not there. In other words, sometimes I talk about Europeans and white people like I'm not one. And I talk about a lot of things like I appear not to be, but I am that because of my story is carrying so many different experiences that are beyond that realm. But what I'm saying to you, I've never allowed myself to be blinded by my earthly identity. I have allowed myself to be in it, but sometimes not of it. I've always tried to look at things from outside of myself and to see myself, to see my own race of people and not be blinded by our story. We that are here that are part of the white European story. And none of us should forget our story. You that are African American should not forget your story. Whatever your background is, you should remember your story and realize that this is an opportunity for us to grow and to mature and to awaken into a different identity that transcends all the identities that we have taken on along the way that has only ended up dividing and separating us. We've got to find this new identity that connects us and not separates us in that way. I've done deep study on this whole idea of what and how the European people have been raised to the level of where they've been. I don't know what to say. We know that most of the world is pretty much controlled by Caucasian male, and I'm going to add in heterosexual men that are feeling very threatened today. And you have to understand that. They're threatened, and they're reacting because of the threat that something is happening that they know at some level they cannot stop. And what's happening is a growth spurt in evolution. And it's happening because consciousness is driving it. And as consciousness is changing, it is literally driving evolution quickly toward a higher state and moving us as fast as it can out of adolescence. 10,000 years we have been in this adolescence. What is that? Dominion over the earth. It starts in the Bible. The Bible is the recording of us moving from the innocence of our childhood into adolescence, which was dominion over the earth. We know if men have dominion over the earth, men will have dominion over the feminine. then there was this subtle thing that nobody really wants to talk about, but there was this idea that somehow from the Old Testament that the Israelites, the chosen people, was transferred to the European. This is true. And the European deep teaching, and it's still out there, is that, wow, I'm getting myself into trouble, is that it was transferred to the European to be lords, kings, and therefore we have the writings of King James, who had taken away, and a part of when the split happened, from the Catholic Church and the Pope into the Anglican Protestant idea that the king was now the power over the people and not the Pope. And of course, wars have been fought over that, and all kinds of situations went on during many, many centuries and years like that. And it came from an old teaching that, I didn't want to get into this, that Israel, the chosen, split. They split. And of the 12 tribes, 2 remained south and 10 went north and split completely. And those who were called the Jewish people were of the house of Judah. That's where the term Jew comes from, is like a nickname for the house of Judah. Like Mike for Michael or Dave for David or something like that. They were called the Jewish people. But never the 10 tribes that went north was called Jews. In fact, the first time the word Jews in the Bible is the Jews fighting the Israelites. And from there, the 10 tribes were told to lose their identity. I did not know I was going to get into this. To lose their identity. I love history. To lose their identity and to be put into lands that they would not know who they were until a certain time. And where they believed those 12 tribes ended up was in Great Britain as a great commonwealth, and in America, the one single nation, Ephraim and Manasseh. This gave the European the idea that we are the chosen of the world. So a lot of what they did believing it was under the power and auspice of God. And don't think this still does not lie deep within the subconscious of the nations of the world today. So there's a reason for all of this, what's called white privilege and all of these things. And I'm sorry, but I just had to expose it a little bit. And it doesn't mean that I should not because I happen to be carnated in a white body here. I'm a spirit before I'm a white body. And you're a spirit before you are an African American black body. And you're a spirit before you were Scottish and Irish and German and anything else that you identify yourself. You are the spirit, the individualization of the one true creator God. And we need to go home and get back. The political, religious climate of today says it's broken, fix it. I say ascend it. Go to the next level. And that's what's trying to open up to us, that's got everything shaking in its boots today. The Bible says when this happens that the world will be like a drunken man going to and fro. Because heaven's trying to set a new order in the earth. And I'm not talking about the new order. I'm about heaven's order. is coming in today, and it's shaking up man's order completely. And as I've said when I first took this, that between these extremities, somebody's got to stand in the gap and make up the hedge. That's what it says. Who shall stand in the gap and make up the hedge? And we said 2.5 years ago, 3 years ago, we will at HeartLight. We will stand in the gap. We will identify ourselves as the spiritual beings that we are first and foremost. Anyway. But that's where it came from. And the thing of the written word, I mean, this is what they were famous for. Shakespeare comes out of that. All of the great writers came out of that era and that time in which they begin to write in themselves as the power of kings, lords of lords. This is what came over into America, is what I'm saying to you. This attitude that, hey, the chosen has set their foot upon the shores of America, and everything else is a savage and a heathen. The Native Americans were here, and out of that greed, we brought the African American. Not to destroy the African American, but to use the African American people to serve us. These things were taught in the early religions. I know they're not something people talk about, but they were taught. They were taught the seeds that African American people were not human, that they were two-legged beasts of the Old Testament that could not enter into the sanctuary, or you could not lie with, and all of this was seeded back then in these religious things that came over into America. I feel I can't hold back because I want you to know where we are in the scheme of what is happening in the world today. Wow, take a breath. That is my little synopsis of what. Back in the 70s and living in Arkansas, I was oftentimes taken down into the hills of Arkansas, into the Ozarks. Find myself in people's homes speaking where, and one time is just coming to my mind right now. It was the scariest thing. My friend, my childhood friend who was gay and a piano player and a good friend, we was asked to come and do this, and there was a guy sitting on the front row about where Tom is right now. And, you know, he had this huge beard, and he looked like he just crawled out of a cave somewhere or something like that. Had this big knife, and he was cleaning his fingernails the whole time that I was talking. And I thought, this really feels strange. So when it got through, I asked, anybody have anything to say? And he didn't even look up, and he says, well, I got one thing to say. I wish Hitler would have fulfilled destroying all those faggot Jews. And I looked at my friend, and my friend looked at me, and we got the message. Be cool. Be cool. Hold on. Just wait. And we'll just easily get out of here. But that meeting was called a British Israel meeting. That's what it was called, a British Israel meeting, that the white race is the only people of the Adamic race and therefore are the only chosen people of God. Everything else holds the serpent seed of the devil. Now, I'm exposing this because it's subtle, but it is still in the very depths of the unconsciousness of a lot of political and religious thinking that's going on in this world today. And another reason I'm saying it is I'm glad for what happened recently, and the trial, and the things, and the movements that are springing up, the women's movement, the Black Lives Matter movement. All those things are great, but they're not getting to the root of what's going on. And I want to put the axe at the root of what's going on. And it is a consciousness that is very still alive. And it needs to be pulled up by the root and called out. Oh, wow. I did not mean to do all that, but I guess I did.
You did.
Okay. Ecclesiastes. I'll bring it back. Ecclesiastes says, one generation passes away, another generation comes, but the earth abideth forever. And the reason I'm giving you that scripture is because I was taught the end of the world meant the end of the earth. People have used earth and world synonymously as the same thing, and they are not. The word world means a system on the earth. And what it's saying, that systems will not last forever, but new systems will be born. But the earth shall abide forever. And one of my favorite ones is in Job 12, 7 and 8. And this is a good one to give some of your friends and family and people who don't believe in any connection at all to nature, that there's anything spiritual about it. This is a great one for you to have. But ask now the beasts, they shall teach thee, and the fowls of the air, and they shall tell thee. Or speak to the earth, and it shall teach you, and the fishes of the sea shall declare it unto you. How clear is that? We had a Native American come a few years ago. We was in Ohio, a shaman, a chief. And I never forget one thing he said to me. We was out in the backyard on a lunch break, and we were just walking. We had beautiful gardens and everything, and there was, this is nature. There was even little spiders and things going on, He said, do you know you just stepped into God's classroom? We believe that nature is God's classroom. And that just stuck with me. And he went back in the house, and I stayed, and there was this little spider. I don't like spiders. My first reaction, get rid of the spider, but I didn't. I watched the spider, observed the spider without any judgment to the spider, and I said, what can you teach me? And you know what it taught me? I'm not thinking about my birth. I'm not thinking about my death. I have no life insurance. I'm just being me in this moment. Yes. And you people, all you do is you start planning. Planning to get old, planning to die, planning to retire, planning this, planning that. And that was my lesson that little spider gave me that day that I took with me. And I've never forgotten that. Nature will teach you, will teach you. You've heard of Margaret Mead, some of you? She says, earth is what we have in common. Never doubt that a small group of thoughtful citizens can change the world. Indeed, it is the only thing that ever has. Do not think of ourselves as small compared to other great religions, churches, and edifices, even in this city and around the world. We can make a difference. We can make a difference. I wanted to mention, I'm going to quit here in a minute, but the suffering that's going on in this country with tornadoes, floods, earthquakes is carried on the breath of Mother Earth because she is in pain, says Robert Blackgoat, the elder of the Navajo Nation of Big Mountain. Roberta Blackgoat, I'm sorry, it's a female. She explains that 4 corners of the area, if you look at Utah, Arizona, Colorado, and New Mexico, right there. This is very sacred land. It holds Mother Earth's internal organs, which is coal and uranium. When the Bureau of Indian Affairs allowed the Peabody coal mine to dig there and to take out, they are trying to take her precious guts out for money, says Roberta Black Goat. My grandfather told me that the coal is like the liver. Uranium is both the heart and the lungs of Mother Earth. The Hopi and Navajo traditionalists are fighting the mining company as we speak to stop the digging. We would see water, for instance, as a resource. The Native American would see water as a source for life, not a resource, but a source. It runs in the veins of Mother Earth. Look what we are doing to the Amazon. It's sad what is going on. All that we are doing, we need to return to a connection and reverence to our Mother Earth. You sitting here carry all the minerals of Mother Earth in you. You are truly physically the children of Mother Earth. Spiritually, I believe that you are the children of Grandmother Moon and Father Sky. All of these have such a tremendous different way of having relationship in a way that we can reverence our true sources of who and all that makes us who and what we are. What can we do about it? I just gave you a few things here to get your mind going. We need to become more conscious about things like to buy reusable bags. I know it's so easy not to do these things. I fall into that all the time. But if we become conscious and less reactionary and more awake, there are things we can do. We can get bottles to put our water in that are refillable and not just keep using these here.
Yeah, get rid of them. You could refill those.
And you could refill that if you have to, but you don't have to just keep getting them and throwing them out and throwing them out. There are things that we can need to do. I want to say that I've been watching a new series, and I'm not sure if it's Netflix or Hulu or one of those, of this Greta Thunberg. She has a whole series. It is so good. This young lady is not a young lady, but it's amazing. I've learned more about what's going on this planet and what shape that we're in by watching this than anything I've ever heard. Sometimes you have to get out of the mainstream media, because the mainstream media is very controlled to a certain degree and edited to what is said. But when you find these breakthrough people that are breaking through cable and not under the power of being edited and what they say, you learn more of the real story. The real story. And because of that, I found it interesting. If I can find it. This is really good. It's a quote by a Jungian author, Helen Luke, and I thought it was so good I wanted to share it with you. We hear only the dark news of the broadcaster, and our inner ear is deaf to the songs of the angels. Isn't that a beautiful saying? We only hear the dark news of a broadcaster, and our inner ear is deaf to the songs of the angels. We call that in Soma Energetics the secret ear. The secret ear is in the heart. It's not on your head. And anyone who is doing energy work should develop that ability to hear differently than what the brain is telling you, but to hear the deeper essence, to connect to the rhythm, the vibration of those things in some way. So today I want to recognize our Mother Earth. And again, as I did last year, I want to renew my commitment to do better than I did last year, that I gave this same kind of message to you a year ago. I can't tell you that I did what I could have done. But I want you to join with me in a new way in which that we can relook at how that we can do this. And I hope that this pandemic thing is going to leave us differently than it found us. Remember I told you that this whole thing was, to me, the universe saying, go to your room and think about it and shut the door. And this has been an opportunity for us to actually rethink some of our situations in that way.
Time to let your heart light shine. Time to let your heart light